Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming, and this is From the Depths with a new update. So we are now up to version 2.4.7.16, which has a few interesting updates, lots of little bug fixes and performance updates. Obviously you can check the logs, and a few interesting little UI changes as well. So some of the UI changes that were previously just in the main menu, you can see that the build menu is slightly different. As an example, it's got a slightly different design now with the more cleaner design. Some of the blocks have changed, minor ones. The only ones, if I can find them now, ones that I remember did change, and I'm going to try and find them here in a second, with detection blocks. There we go. Sonar detection, radar, chaff emitter, they did change. There was the signal jammer, has a new look to it. They're the main ones that I saw as far as block changes. Didn't see there's lasers we'll get into in a little bit. Everything else seems relatively the same as far as I can see at the moment. A couple of new blocks which we will go through in a second. So what we have, if I go back into first person mode, is some changes which affect quite a bit when you're in the first person view rather than third person view. Now, one change is, I'm going to need to put the UI on so I've got the targeting. One change is in your ACBs you can control a few items, including now the missile systems doors, which we've got here, and also video screens, which are a new addition. There is also this new ACB controller. So an ACB controller allows you to set buttons that work and do various activate various named ACBs. So in the ACB you give it a name, and then in the button you reference that name. Now obviously you don't have, if you've got two ACBs which have got the same name, don't know what's going to happen there, but not a good thing. But now what can happen is we've got two buttons. If I click a button here by pointing at it and pressing Q, the door opens, and then click the arrow button and the door closes. So that's we can now got these ACB controllers. Now what you can use it on is your own doors. Let's say you had it to your own little area, so we'll open up the door and then you could go in and have a button to close it, or here at the moment we just click the button and there it closes. So on the UI you can have your own little door buttons or any other ACBs. This could be a button for activating something. Anything that can be activated or deactivated in an ACB, you can now put up in to 12 buttons to effectively control whatever you like from your bridge position, if you so desire. Now one other change, or I wouldn't say a change, we've got the video screen. Now the video screen's been around for a little while, but you'll notice here that the screen there actually has a live image, and it's actually got live images of the wireless camera. So when you are looking at these, you've got multiple channels now you can select, and each one can have a camera or a YouTube video or a locally downloaded video, etc., so that you can change various types. Now that means in this controller, and if I just go into build mode, you can select a screen. Now I did put a little, if you want to give a screen, this screen a name, like I called this screen 1, what you need to do is press Shift N to be able to change the name. Personally I think it should be in this UI, just the same as ACBs, just a quality of life change, but I've put a bug in or suggestion in for that. But what you can do is, once you have set up all of your channels you wish, if I go back into my normal mode, is I've now got a basic video controller. So this basic video controller has a zoom button and a couple of channels. Now this is just built directly, selected. You haven't got to build these buttons. This is just like a default setting. So I could turn it off. So you can see it's actually gone to a static image there. Turn it back on again, and then I can change the channel. So we've got a camera in the inside of the vehicle, and then we've got the deck here. So as I move around, you can see on the screen my character is moving around, and we've got the smoke there, and we've got a forward. And when you are on any of these ones, you can zoom in if you wish, or zoom out if you don't hold the Q for too long. If I tap the Q, then we zoom out. So that's one little change we can do. The other bit is in the ACB you can change your change the video screens based upon the ACBs. Set volumes, change channels, start, stop, etc. So you could have various videos to play to show various elements, I guess. I'm sure people will come up. Here I've just got a simple timer. So as like a security screen, it's just, or someone who basically has really no attention whatsoever, it's flicking through the various channels every few seconds. Because you've got all the channels, why not use them? So anyway, that is the changes to videos and some new blocks that I noticed coming out. One of the largest changes in this update has been to the laser system. Now there is on the forums an update about what they've changed, and I'm not an expert, should we say, on lasers. I prefer me guns, to be perfectly honest. But the basis of it is to change the way some of the elements work, so that lasers aren't just the ultimate damage system. They're now going to be a little bit more long range, accurate fire rather than just huge amounts of damage. So they're going to have pluses and minuses, and basically a rebalancing of some of the blocks, and I think it'll look better. Now, as an example, one of the first ones is that the accuracy now of the weapon is set at 0.05 degrees, which means that the laser optics and the steering optics no longer affect the accuracy of a weapon. They only affect, we'll call it the focus and arc of a weapon. So by adding in steering optics, if I go into the build mode, if we go back to a single block, we can see we've got a 6.7 arc. If I add the steering, that goes up to a 50% arc. There is a point where it actually has a diminishing effect, so after a certain bit you see it's actually going down the other way, which could be seen as a little strange. But the other is the laser optics. So now the laser optics, now you'll notice on the screen, on the little UI, that the amount of damage is reducing over distance. So the further away your target is, the less damage you're going to do. So 60% at 500 meters down to 1.8 at 4,000. So adding the laser optic is basically increasing the range at which damage happens with the weapon, but at the same time it is reducing the firing arc. You could then add in steering optics, so we're down to 4,033%, 8.57. We can now add in some steering optics to increase that firing arc again. So it's a balancing act, and at one point you'll find that it starts going in the opposite direction. So 17, 18, yeah, basically just one after. I'm sure people will do lots of metrics on this, but yeah, we can see that the damage is being increased over the distance. So you can think of it more as focusing. These laser optics are focusing it on a particular point, so the further away it can focus it and get more damage on that one point. Other changes, there has been changes to the way the damage of the laser in general and the armor effect, and how to block these. You've got whether to use Q or not to use Q. So a constant laser has a high armor piercing. You can see here 533. With doing very little, I get a very high armor piercing, but damage is very low, but still sustained damage of 30 a second. If we then just add in a Q stabilizer, a Q switch, sorry, you'll see that the armor piercing's gone down 266, but the damage is much higher because it's on a burst laser. And as we add more switches, the AP goes down is it going down? Oh no, sorry, it's going to be producing more bursts, so the AP doesn't go down, but each burst is slightly lower, but it's going to have a higher firing rate. The wavefront is also an adjuster, and now this has a fairly simple effect in that using the air front reduces your base damage by 50%, but reduces the effect of smoke and shields, which we'll have a look at in a second. It doesn't directly affect these areas, it affects the base damage. So we can see the next damage 73, 266. We see the damage effect, but the other effects only will take into effect if it hits some sort of resistance, I believe, on that one. So again, needs a bit of testing. We'll let them iron out a few bugs and then we'll look at lasers. One good thing I personally think is, for aesthetics as much as anything and effectiveness, it's possible to have some relatively small lasers. You don't have to have a massive great laser on the end of it. If you only want, say, out to about 500, 600 or 1000 meters, you can have an accurate, reasonably damaging weapon for, say, flyers, or just keeping the turrets nice and compact. It's all going to be more about the laser cavities and your pumps rather than anything else. There was one other element about this as well, in that I think the energy that's used is more going to be used more steadily rather than using everything and requiring massive engines. So it's going to be more about having good pumps and good cavities rather than a massive engine in your vehicles. LAMs as such, I don't think are affected directly, except for the fact that they've got very good accuracy. I've been firing against some ships with LAM systems with APS, and it seems that APS are more susceptible now to LAMs than they used to be in the past. One thing then, another change was anti-laser defences. So the two types of defences, you've got smoke and smoke shells and lasers and shields. So shields, basically, way they are going to work now, if it's on laser absorb, the shield strength here will basically have reduce the AP of the firing round. So at a level of 1, it's basically going to halve the armor piercing of the incoming laser. At 5, its AP is reduced to 10%, so that 266 is now only 26, and going up to a full level 10 shield is down to 5%. Wavefront is not reduced by as much, as you can see on this slider. In actual fact, a level 1 shield doesn't actually, or level 2 shield doesn't actually reduce the armor APF at all of a wavefront. But somewhere around a 4 has a good effect on all systems, as an example, depending if they're using wavefronts or not. So that's one area. Now smoke has now got a different density depending on what they are. Now a smoke layer, so if we find the correct part, smoke, there we go, one of these now have a smoke density of 65%, so they have a base 65% reduction. Now you can have up to, I think it's 3 layers of smoke affecting a laser as it's going through, so these are still the most effective. Then you have AP rounds. So if you build an AP round of large enough and then put a smoke canister in there, so firing out a nice bit of smoke. Now they still only work at 20 centimeters or higher, but now the gauge of the weapon firing the smoke has an effect on the density. Haven't got the exact figures, but 200 mil I think is only around, I think it's about 6 or 7% density, and a 500 millimeter is heading more towards the maximum percentage value. As I say, I can't remember the exact figures now at this moment, but basically smoke is yeah, actually I've got it here. 45% for 500 mil, 7.5% for 200, and a scaling in between. So it does mean that, you know, one good 500 mil big smoke canister or lots of 200, it's going to take more than just one smoke from a 200 mil. So some decisions to be made there on anti-smoke, but the dispensers are still the best. Lasers, as I say, they don't block it now so much as reduce its damage. Interesting concept. I think it's different to some sci-fi type of lasers, but I think it does mean that small flyers can put a small laser on there, and then not to be small low power shield, and still have some defense against a laser, whereas before basically they'd have to have quite a high value, meaning a big battery system. One other thing I should say about shields, don't know if I mentioned this, now when the laser hits, it takes the power away from your sheer engine generation, not your battery storage or battery energy from other places. So I think you've got to have enough extra engine power to absorb the laser hit. Need to have a look on those. I haven't done enough testing with lasers on that to see exactly how much power based upon the laser it takes. I'll look around for some figures on that. Other little changes, there's been some bug fixes, such as the ID number is now on the ammo controller again. Yippee! So my Tiger in my other video has now been updated to have its ammo changed based upon the range to the target. In the AI mainframes, you've now got this nice little GUI. I did that video on how to set up some of the mainframes and behaviors. Now you've got a bit of a nice little GIF that plays here at the top to tell you how to use behaviors, you know, decides how to engage, adjustments, tells you, you know, how to avoid land, etc. Good. Maneuver, how it gets to a waypoint. So that's a nice little GIF that's coming in there. Additional doesn't have anything at the moment. Right. Other one is PIDs. Previously, to set a PID, you'd have to actually select the PID box, and in here says it your pitch, roll, etc. Now you just attach the PID blocks, and in here you can say what type of PID this is, and you can select, depending on how many PIDs you've got, you can select the different PID types. So if I add an extra PID in here, we can now select 2 PIDs. So that's a nice little change. Was being a little awkward at times to do this. It doesn't mean that everything's now all within the AI UI, which I think is good. So one other change in the logs was for the campaign on map view was the use of supply routes. So this is where you've got a ship which has got a high capacity for resources, needs to take the resources and materials to another fleet. If we turn the resource mode on, primarily you've got your groups. Now what I noticed is in general the ships have got to be in the same resource group to transfer the items, even if you're using supply routes. The second part is using a supply route, you can define the group. So this is design for. I want to take from design for, and I want to give to the Tiger group down here. So I'm going to force feed the Tiger group. So that's going to be what I want to do with this ship. So you can actually now see there is a blue line going here and a green line going over there, and this is filling up now with resources. But one thing I noticed is to really get this to fill up, if it still relies currently on this resource percentage. So if I set my design for to be 20%, it will still hold on to 20% and will not give it to the barge. So you have to set this to, I've been trying to set this to 0 in most cases, and set them on their own little group. Number 4, which is orange, you can see there's an orange circle around here, and then that receives, again, not all of the material, it's still holding on to some of it even though it's set to 0, and that's because this one is also set to 0. So they both take a percentage based upon their total capacity. So they're both taking an equal amount, or holding back an equal amount. So there's no way to force it. You can say, oh yes, you set the barge at 100% here, and yes, that will then take everything. But that has a different effect at the other end, and there is problems the other way. So I did put this up as it's not a good or very what should we say, intuitive way of doing it. If you set something to take, it should take everything or up to a percentage, etc. Not have to mix your supply routes with these routes. Anyway, let's now head down to our fleet to give them resources, and we'll show the next part of the system. So now we're at the point where our resource ship has got its materials and wants to give it to this fleet. So now it's got to get within the resource area bubble of the receiving fleet. Now, although it is in the bubble and the resource area range, and under our force we have a force feed, it will not give out the resources because the Tiger fleet is set on group 1 and this is on group 4, so we've got to set this onto group 1 as well. Then it will distribute all of the resources. So the force feed does work there, and it is sending all of its resources, power, everything else that's on board to the receiving fleet. So that bit of it works quite nicely, but you must be on the same resource group as the receiving group. So now, not changing anything, if we now head back to our resource area, we've got one problem. Let's say you've got more than one ship providing resources. So we've got resource ship here providing, bringing some down, and we've got an empty ship going back to gather some more. So at the point when these two resource ships meet up. So we've got one with 8,400 and one with 0. When they get within each other's resource zone, and they're both set up identically to be on 0, so keep no resources whatsoever. But because they're in the same groups, they end up splitting the resources between them. So basically, the now empty ship is no longer empty and is heading back to the resource zone with half of the resources which were supposed to be taken down here. So this is a problem, in that if you use more than one ship on a route, or it happens to meet another ship whilst on that route, or you'd have to, if you wanted to do this as patrol routes, you'd have to go deliver here, then take a convoluted route out over here to go back into here, to then come back again. So quite a wide patrol route to deliver your resources, to ensure you don't meet another resource vessel heading in the opposite direction. Hopefully that explains the problem I have with this. Otherwise, it's a good idea, just needs a bit of, let's say, refinement, a few changes, just to make it a little bit more intuitive, because it's very difficult to set up as a perfect delivery system. It's fine in small numbers, but I think once we get to the bigger map, when you're possibly running ships all over, and especially if you're running with some game rules that say you have to do everything from your central base, you may have a few little problems with logistics. But yeah, that's the way of it, really, unfortunately. That's about it for this video. I think I've covered most of the updates we've had coming through this build, and hopefully there's nothing else major going to be happening around. There may be a pass on APS, but I think we're going to have some calm time for a little bit to really get some gaming done and actually finish the campaign. So until next time, if there's anything I've missed or something important you feel should be in here, please leave the comments down below so we can discuss and let everybody else know. But otherwise, keep playing the game and have fun.